We're ready to go?
Yep. I wonder how many more times it's going to go out.
Okay, I have 8:15, or actually 9 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call a special meeting to order. We can have a roll call, please.
Yes.
Here.
Cottle. Passanello. Here. Aiken.
Here. All right, great. Purpose of our special meeting tonight, we had two guests that we had invited. Jim Napoli from Somerset Crossing, unfortunately, due to a delay, he's not able to come, but he did send an email that we just passed around that will make part of the record for tonight's meeting. Also, we invited Chairman Bob Weir from the Planning Commission to speak, to kind of give us an update on his citizens' time or public hearing that he had from the Planning Commission. And we have a resolution, too, that after Mr. Weir speaks. So we'll invite you up to the podium. Or, sure.
Town employees to the table.
Okay, so what you're looking for is an update on what the Planning Commission input was that we received, where we're going, and I suspect a recommendation. We held a very lengthy input session, a public hearing on Dominion beginning of this month, a week after y'all's meeting and roughly 10 days after your work session. Got a lot of input from local citizens, both residents of the town and immediate nearby residents. We took that input. We asked a lot of questions of Dominion. Quite frankly, it's a moving target right now where they're going to put the line. Where it stands right now, we have asked Dominion to provide us with some additional input. They have agreed to give us some additional input with regard to alternate routes, cost for those alternate routes, whether they be above ground or underground. We are currently waiting for Dominion to supply a lot of that information. We're also waiting for some information from Delegate Marshall and some other elected officials. I can kind of give you a sketch of the issues that we're considering. We are going to have a draft report ready for you, all things being equal. Second week of October, we hope to have we'll have a draft put together before then. We hope to act on a draft report and proposed resolution for your action at the November meeting. We've talked to Dominion and sketched out a timeline with them. We've sort of pushed everything as quickly as we can to try and save you guys from being behind the 8 ball and having to do things in a hurry. Dominion has assured us that they will not submit anything to the State Corporation Commission prior to the end of November, and I suspect it's actually going to be later than that. In fact, if you look at their time frames, their original time frames called for submitting to the SEC in the late fall. They're now calling for late 2014. I have a suspicion it's not going to happen until 2015 at the very earliest. I mean, my guess would be them getting that before the SEC prior to January would be a real tough row for them to hoe. So let me kind of give you a rundown of what we're considering and what we're going to probably have in the report. If you look at Dominion's statement of need, they essentially say there's a rapid growth in electrical demand, particularly in the commercial high-tech sector in the Haymarket area. It's a need that has resulted in the need to build a new substation and associated transmission facility in western Prince William County and southern portions of Haymarket. That's the first sort of thing we sort of took issue with. They assert there's a need to add capacity to serve growth. They need to strengthen the electrical grid and improve overall reliability, enable continued economic development, and that they have to energize the lines by 2017 when the loads exceed 100 megawatts. Those are nice goals by Dominion. We're glad to hear they've got us in mind. They've got our needs and our power situation in mind. But quite frankly, I and the vast majority, if not the entirety of the Planning Commission, don't buy it. In talking with Dominion, particularly at their open house that they had 2 days after the Planning Commission, it's quite apparent that the sole and only need for this power line is the Amazon complex. And I'll make no bones about it. It is an Amazon complex. I've talked to the load engineers and the routing people from Dominion. The program manager actually brought them over to me at the open house and had them address any questions I had. In fact, they gave me the load engineers, the routing engineers, their wetlands people, their contracts people. They were more than accommodating. And what became very clear, in fact, was stated directly, was the need for this was the demand from Amazon for literally 100 megawatt service at that site. In fact, that assertion sort of took some of the options that we had laid on the table off the table because they would no longer work. In order to deliver the 100 megawatts, the only way to deliver that to that site is to have a substation immediately adjacent to property. There is not going to be an option to place the substation someplace else and then route power through the bridging lines or anything like that, because the bridging lines will not accommodate that load. They will not carry 100 megawatts. So the idea of locating the substation at some other site, at some other point, and then running power from there to the data center is not going to be a viable one for practical purposes. That being said, Dominion has pointed out a few things to us. They have committed to, if they do build the bridging lines, the express lines, to handle the data center's immediate demands before it goes fully online, they have committed to doing the construction between 9:30 and 3 o'clock to avoid rush hour issues. I know that's a small thing, but it's something. With regard to the location, that's entirely up to Amazon. If Amazon decides to put it there, Dominion Power is going to run the power there. The question is that the only place that Dominion can put that, or excuse me, that Amazon can put that data center? If you look at the preliminary route that they gave to you guys at the work session, this was only a preliminary route. 10 days later, when they came before the Planning Commission, they had 3 different routes proposed and alternative routes. If you go on their website now, that number has grown even further. There are even more preliminary options of the preliminary option, alternative routes that run through a variety of places, and interestingly, several alternatives that don't even involve Haymarket at all. They've got 2 spur lines that run over to, if anybody's familiar with the land use proceedings currently going on in the county, they've got 2 lines that now, one that terminates at the location for the Stonehaven complex, and the other one which terminates over at the old, not Atlas, the munitions plant, the rocket fuel place. I can't. The name escapes me. Now it goes by Prince William Station on the county's planning horizon. So there is some hope that perhaps this becomes a moot issue if Amazon decides to relocate that data center someplace else. I know that several of our state elected officials have approached Amazon and are approaching Amazon right now to do just that. We haven't discussed this at the Planning Commission level, but my personal feeling is, power demands aside, in 2017 in the area, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Amazon to put a data center out here on the edge of town. It makes much more sense for them to put it at a place that's already equipped from an infrastructure standpoint to deliver that 100 megawatts of lots of power, whether it be at the Innovation Center that the county has invested so much money in, or on the other sites off Balls Ford, where similar data centers are already operating, are in direct proximity to the existing transmission lines. And I believe those are alternatives that several of our delegates and state senators are pursuing right now. I've got these in no particular order because these are my typewritten notes, so you have to bear with me as I kind of skip and jump around. I think one of the things that we're going to have to consider when we draft the report for you is that the burden of the costs and the impacts, whether they be visual or property are going to be principally borne by the residents. They're going to be borne by the residents along the line and not by Amazon. It's kind of funny if you look at the legislation passed in the last 2 years by the General Assembly. They by and large exempt the large industrial users from bearing those costs, especially for burying power lines. There was some question as to where the location of the proposed lines was with regard to the town boundaries. They're actually within the town boundaries. We have located the stone marker. We've pulled it up on a GPS. We've compared it to their plat, and those power lines will run generally within the town from the eastern border to the western border. There was some mention of a proposed alternate route that also runs along the railroad track with a greater setback closer to Somerset than to the town. In looking at the topography and looking at the floodplain maps, looking at the wetland maps, it's easy to see that particular proposal is going to be having a greater environmental impact and probably a greater engineering cost. I think one of the other things we also need to point out, we had this on a slide at the Planning Commission, was if they're allowed to build this route, it's not just the power lines that the residents have to be worried about. If you look at some of the similar transmission lines that run to the west of the battlefield, you'll find what are in essence miniature substations located beneath some of the towers. In fact, I've got a very dear friend of mine who has one in her backyard. It's visible from her house. The other thing that will not require review or any sort of public hearing by the county. They've exempted that, as have they exempted mobile telecommunications antenna arrays. Those can be erected on the towers, again, with no public hearing, no public input. It's essentially a by right use as far as the county is concerned, and they will just allow them to do it without a public facilities review. On the routing itself, it's interesting that they've sort of keyed on the notion of running the line from the 234 bypass. We brought up the suggestion Planning Commission meeting, and I know it was brought up again at the public hearing, that instead of running it from the 234 bypass, they run it from either the Fauquier substation or the Wheeler-Walker substation, which is to be built in the near future, which is actually closer as the crow flies than the 234 bypass. There has been some pushback on that. They're claiming they have to cross sensitive environmental and historic areas. I would say the same applies for going through Haymarket, so the argument sort of cuts both ways. I suspect a lot of this has to do with the fact that they would have to deal with the Buckland Mills people who fought them successfully in that particular instance. However, Buckland Mills had the support of Fauquier County, which did not want the lines to cross that area. We do not have that same support from the county. Several of the county supervisors, several of the planning commissioners, and several of the people in the planning department have made note that the county will take no position on this. They will not help us. They will not take a position on it because, and I quote, this falls within their designated power line corridors and their comp plan. Therefore, they're going to wash their hands of it. They're going to leave it up to us. I essentially have an email from the planning director of Prince William County that all but says that. And I have it verbally and in newspaper reports from both the Planning Commission and from the Board of Supervisors. Other routes. South of I-66 is not an option. They had already identified 6 houses, not to mention the dozen townhouses that lie directly on top of the routing. That's not going to work. North of I-66 is another matter. It is now an option. They presented an options map for that to the Planning Commission. There is enough right-of-way between the VDOT, the end of the VDOT right-of-way, and I'm assuming is Piedmont's property lines, or at least their easements. They have enough for an overhead line. At that point in time, Dominion was not willing to consider putting an underground line there. They were only willing to give us a cost estimate for doing it above ground. When we pushed the issue, they stated that they weren't going to give us an underground pricing because they didn't have to. And the premise that the Planning Commission put forward was, in other words, you want us to oppose the route south, support the route north of I-66, and then start a war between the two sides of I-66. I said that's not an option for us. If you're going to have us consider this, we want to consider apples to apples. If you're going to give us an underground cost for running through town, and you're going to give us an overhead cost for that, we also want an underground and an overhead cost to running it down 66 on the north side. Dominion has committed to providing that to us prior to the, I believe it's the October meeting, but I'll have to go back and double check my notes on them. VDOT's participation in the process to this point, I guess you could characterize it as a yes, no, or maybe. Dominion has changed their story on multiple occasions, and during the course of the Planning Commission hearing, changed it at least 3 or 4 times. Initially, Dominion asserted that VDOT would not work with them. They then said that they hadn't actually spoken to VDOT yet. And then they said, well, we think VDOT's willing to work with us, but they were going to approach them and see how viable the I-66 routing was. Again, they're supposed to get back to us on that. They have not to this point in time. They did affirm that to date, or at least as of the beginning of the month, they have had no discussions with Norfolk Southern. None. And a lot of this lies within the railroad easement. I think I should point out that the projected route or the proposed route does not impact the VRE easement. The double track line, the easement for that lies on the north side of the tracks, not on the south side. They are proposing to put the power lines, at least 140 feet off from the railroad tracks. If VRE does double track, it will be to the town residents' detriment. It will be to the north side of the tracks because that's where their easement lies for that. So it will have no impact on a VRE expansion to Haymarket, at least in theory. Underground. Dominion does not want to do underground. They claim it's not particularly an option. Historically, that's not the case. If you go into Arlington, I can give you an urban example at Radnor Heights where they ran several miles of underground line. Yes, it's in a highly urban area, much of it's suburban area as well, but they also ran a half mile through Bowmead and Ashburn, which is an historic district, which was nothing but farmlands and, well, a data center. And they ran it underground to the data center substation. So there are similar facilities, there are similar underground facilities in Northern Virginia and in the rest of the state, and it seems to be that the State Corporation Commission, at least this is my feeling in reading their stuff, is that they are more likely to either suggest or force Dominion to put stuff underground depending on particular circumstances. If you look at a JLARC report from the General Assembly from, I believe it's 2008, they talk specifically about what the State Corporation Commission considers. And with regard to underground transmission lines as opposed to your regular service lines, what the JLARC considers as important for considering underground transmission lines, or whether it's in a densely populated urban or suburban area, I would suspect we fit that, or I would suggest that we fit that definition. Areas with limited right-of-way, that's definitely this area, whether you're talking about I-66 or you're talking about the potential right-of-way alongside the railroad track. River crossings, it's not a river crossing that we're dealing with, but they're talking about building in a floodplain, if not the actual creek bed under one of the proposed routings. Airport's not particularly a consideration, but I guess we could make the argument that we're close enough to Manassas Airport to factor that in. We do see a fair number of low-flying aircraft. And then there are design situations, i.e. where the approaches to the substation are in a congested area. You could make that argument as it crosses the Southern Gateway, and in areas where it's unacceptable for visual amenity reasons, and they cite the National Park as an exemplar. I guess we could make the argument that our historic district has as much visual amenity as a national park or some of the proposed areas that they've done it before. One of the interesting things about the underground lines that we found out was Dominion's position on their ability to determine where breaks in service are and the cost of repairing those breaks sort of depends on who you ask. They've told the General Assembly that your regular service lines, they prefer to put them underground. because they find it easier, more cost-effective to determine where the break is and to repair it. Apparently, the repair cost can be as much as 50% as with the above grounds. When we start talking transmission lines, they make the exact argument that it takes much longer to find the break. I find that hard to believe given today's technology, and it's much more expensive to fix. Again, it depends on which person at Dominion you're talking to. If you're talking to the project manager, that's the position they take. If you talk to the engineers, they take a slightly different one. That yes, they have the technology in place to locate the breaks rather quickly, and they have the technology to fix them as rapidly underground as they would above ground. Thing to consider, and this became very clear during the Planning Commission's hearing, was that if you look at their diagrams, they're proposing a roughly 140-foot right-of-way, clear-cut right-of-way, which will knock all the trees down from the edge of the railroad tracks halfway up the hill to Somerset. What doesn't appear in that right-of-way, in that right-of-way diagram, is a larger right-of-way. It's 200-foot right-of-way, or at least a minimum of 200 feet right-of-way, where they will not only clear that 140 as a clear cut, but anything that they determine is a danger tree that might fall into the pole. So we're probably looking, given the mature growth of the forest back there, you're probably looking at a much more substantial, for lack of a better term, clear-cut area than just the 140 foot that appears on their map. I'm sorry I'm bouncing all over the place. Future demand. If you look at the development in the western part of the county, particularly west of Haymarket, west and south of Haymarket in the last couple of years, I know Mr. Vanderpool is very familiar with this, particularly along the Route 15 corridor. I and the rest of the Planning Commission concur that their prognostication of the commercial demand is probably overstated. It's overstated with commercial, and it's definitely overstated with regard to the industrial need. Your principal industrial commercial demand centers, apart from the Amazon data center if it's built, and apart from the hospital, lie to the east of town. They lie on the 29 Linton Hall corridor area where they're building up, whether it be Gateway, whether it be Stonehaven, anything else. I mean, that's where that is. The Lerner property, where they've got several million square feet of commercial planned, which we will see at some point in time in the future. The Heritage Hunt commercial area that's currently being built up. The warehouse areas along McGraw Corner. By the same token, if you look at this area on the west of town, I think the prime example of what's happening around here is the Villages of Piedmont 2. You had more than 1 million square feet of commercial and industrial usage wiped out as part of the rezoning 2 years ago. That was one of the selling points to the county. They replaced it with residential housing, but the residential housing does not have near the impact that 1 million square feet are. So I think Dominion's premise, their base premise is pretty disingenuous. They claim this is all for our benefit. Again, I can't help but reiterate, the only people that are going to benefit from this is Amazon. And we're being asked to bear both the visual and the real cost of doing it. Of course, you've got the electromagnetic impact on health, the cancer concerns. I'm not a doctor. I mean, there's data on both sides of the argument. Dominion denies it. There are those that don't. It's something that we'll have to factor in. We will factor into the report. How much it's going to factor in, I can't tell you right now. I'm going to have somebody else do that research because I'm not comfortable with it. We're going to have to work a lot of things into that. We're going to have to work in how the transmission lines fit our comp plan, how they fit our ordinances. Quite frankly, I don't think that they fit our comp plan. Whether that's a viable argument when it comes to the State Corporation Commission, it's worth throwing at the wall. Is it going to make a bit of difference? I don't know. We do have a provision under Land Use Section 2.7a where we're charged with ensuring the compatibility of the land use, and we have to protect the residential impacts from the adverse impacts of commercial and industrial land use. This is obviously an industrial land use. Impact on the streetscape, it's greater than I think people believe or have considered. Will you see it from town? Yes. I think that's become quite evident from their aerial or from from their representations, even though, quite frankly, they're done from angles that make it sort of misleading as to how much you're going to actually visibly see the lines. But I think where you're going to really see it is at the gateways, the southern gateway and the southwestern gateway, where you cross Carolina, where you cross Old Carolina, where you cross Route 15. Route 15 is another issue because of the widening and the grade separation of the railroad tracks. That's going to present some interesting issues from an engineering standpoint. Dominion apparently was not aware of the widening, nor the at-grade separation. Tracking back to villages at Piedmont, a lot of that is already proffered. The land and some of the construction is already proffered by the developer and is in place. We know from the Route 15, or excuse me, the Route 66 interchange improvements, so a lot of that's going to be done in the near future. So, I mean, that's something else to consider, but you're going to have that running across your gateway, which is part of your historic district text and part of the comp plan and all of that. I think one of the things that we've got working in our favor that goes hand in hand with that is, at that point, it also crosses the journey through hallowed ground. And this is where we may have some opportunity to get some support from the county because they do have an overlay district for the journey through hallowed ground and a couple of other overlay districts. I've got to look a little more carefully into that. I'm running out of time, but that will be done prior to the October meeting. We'll work that in. A couple of other things that need to be considered are the floodplain. Dominion has confirmed that they will be building in the floodplain, and yes, that will require DEQ review out of Richmond. It will also require a Corps of Engineers sign-off, Game and Inland Fisheries, Conservation Authority, the Historic Commission. It's all part of the application process, but that's something that that's a bridge that we would cross if need be once an application was submitted to the SEC that actually went into that area. It's something that we have to consider in our report to you if they don't come up with a more defined route between now and then. But at the end of the day, it's something that's going to be considered much further down the line. I'm almost at the end. One of the things I think that we have to consider and that I've talked to Delegate Marshall about and I've talked to Dominion about is that Amazon has chosen a site for this data center which is problematic. It's problematic from an environmental standpoint. It's also problematic from a land use standpoint. They're very limited, or Dominion will be very limited in where they can place the substation if they got to place it in close proximity to that particular data center. The land to the south of that, immediately south of that, is covered by conservation easements. The land to the west of it is covered by the rural crescent. The land to the north of it's already developed, and the land to the east of it already has a building on it. So the physical constraints are going to be rather difficult for them to deal with, which leads us to where do we go from here? The Planning Commission is committed to having a report done in draft form by its October meeting and in your hands by your first meeting of November. It's going to be a report like you've never seen come out of this town before. It's got to be fully documented, footnoted, photos, diagrams, data tables, everything's got to be in it. It's going to be, it's a piece of work. It's taking quite a bit of time, and the entire Planning Commission is going to be working on it. I hope to have we hope to have the draft approved in October. We'll work the details out in the last, probably the third week of October, and then get you a finished draft prior to your work session for the November meeting. That way, you've got something in hand prior to the earliest that Dominion's going to do anything. In talking to Dominion, I don't believe they're going to do anything until end of November at the earliest, and like I said earlier, I don't think it's actually going to happen until late December or January at the earliest. But in order to be prepared for a worst-case scenario, we talked to Dominion about their timeline, our requirements, and they were comfortable with us having something ready to go with November, and they gave us reasonable assurances that nothing would happen prior to you guys being able to act on it. Which leads to the question: what do you do? We're going to give you a plan. We're going to give you a report. We're going to give you a draft resolution. And I've looked at the draft resolution that you guys have here, and it's a good start. But quite frankly, I would strongly reconsider considering this one tonight. In talking with Dominion, and talking with other bodies, and talking with our elected officials from the state, and talking with consultants, it's pretty clear. If you want to oppose it, that's great. Come out with a resolution of opposition, but you can't just say, no, not in my backyard. You've got to say, no, not in my backyard, but here are your alternatives, or here are our suggested alternatives. It does no good to simply say no and not afford an alternate route, because then it makes your self-interest appear just a little too much for the State Corporation Commission, which leads us to the State Corporation Commission. Given the county's overlays, given the comp plan, the transmission corridors, and all of that, and the assertions by various Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors members that they can and will do nothing, from a jurisdictional standpoint, we're about the only municipal jurisdiction with any authority to file anything with the State Corporation Commission. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Vanderpool, but they'll allow anybody to testify so long as you sign up. But I suspect from a standing standpoint, if indeed the county doesn't do anything, which I'm sort of ascribed to believe that that's what's going to happen, we're going to be the only municipality that comments on this. So we need to think long and hard about what you submit. It's got to be bulletproof. So I wouldn't get in any great big hurry to do it. Like I said, I suspect Dominion's timeline is much longer than what they're saying right now. If you use the Wheeler-Walker project as an exemplar, I think that took, 6 to 8 months longer than they thought just to get to the SCC because of public opposition in the Oaksville area. And I think we do need to present them with some alternatives. If Amazon is going to locate there, and they're dead set on locating it there, and they probably are because they have an existing facility on the neighboring parcel, then we're going to have to push for a proposal such as undergrounding it either down I-66, down through town, something like that. I don't what that particular configuration is. I don't know. It's going to largely depend on Dominion. Like I said, if you look at their most recent map, they've got a variety of new ones that weren't even there for the Planning Commission hearing. So they are thinking about it. It doesn't appear that they're completely wed to this proposed route. And we also might want to push Amazon. It might be worth it to contact them or have somebody contact them and try and have them consider an alternate location. That's really all I've got tonight. Like I say, we're going to have everything ready for your November meeting, all things being equal. And I would strongly suggest you wait until then so you've got the most bulletproof thing to put before the State Corporation Commission. What you're also going to probably need to do is make a determination if you want to testify at the State Corporation Commission. I would strongly suggest that somebody from the town, or somebody on the town's behalf, speak both at the hearings in Richmond, and my guess is they're going to have a local hearing. At least that's my understanding of how they're going to operate this time. There's an application process to testify. I would strongly suggest that the town get the paperwork together and start thinking about who's going to go, what they're going to say. And quite frankly, I would suggest the more people that go, the better. That's all I've got for you tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions for?
Yeah, I do have a few.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was pretty insightful. There are a couple of things that you mentioned.
Hang on. I forgot one thing. I'm sorry. One thing. Where did I put it? There was a quote that when I was talking about JLARC, one of the quotes from the JLARC report is, they do not consider the adverse impact on your property values.
Really?
Page 106. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you for that. You mentioned a few times in speaking with Dominion, in speaking with Dominion, but we've already established that they cannot be trusted. The mere fact that you've done your research and you've come back to share that they're going to be on the entirety of our property when they stated to us that they were just touching a small portion, in addition to all the other things that we have collected on them so far. I mean, when we had our meeting, they came with one route. They weren't giving us an input. There was no need for them to try to justify why they needed citizens' input. And since then, they've come up with 4 or 5 or maybe even more additional routes. But in saying that, is there a possibility that if we should wait, what if we wait and Dominion still submit their plans to the SCC? Is that a possibility without us stating a position on it?
It's certainly a possibility. Is it likely? In my considered opinion, no. I think what you have to consider when you're talking about dealing with Dominion is who you're talking to at Dominion. When we had the Planning Commission hearing, I was very explicit in who I wanted from Dominion to show up. I did not just want a PR person. As Mr. Vanderpool was aware, I'm quite the cynical one. I don't trust PR people as far as I can throw them. PR people are here to sell you something. They're going to sell you on a route, or they're going to sell you on their power to put that route in. To that very point, when they came to the Planning Commission, we had their engineers here. They didn't have as many engineers as I would have liked, but they were here and they were uncomfortable. And what I suspect was their lawyer was very uncomfortable with a couple of questions regarding who their customer/client/user was. But the interesting thing about dealing with engineers and professionals is, as opposed to the PR person, they are much more likely to give you a straight answer to a straight question when you ask them. And that became even more apparent at the open house they held 2 days after the Planning Commission meeting. I'll be brutally frank with you. In order to deflect or appease some of the masses who were there with bullhorns and T-shirts, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, that show of support does go a long way. It serves a purpose. But in order to appease them, the Dominion people deigned to allow them to speak and ask questions of their PR rep. While those people were getting the PR fluff piece, the project manager actually came up to me in the middle of the room and said, "Here's my load engineer, here's my route engineer, here's my contracts person, here's my environmental person. We need input back from the town. You ask them any question you want, and they'll answer any question you want." And we asked them a number of questions. We asked them separately. I did that on purpose. One of the things you'll find is if you ask them all the same questions in their own particular niches, they'll generally give you a little more than they're supposed to. And when you piece it all together, you get the true picture. That's the way we found out that the 100 megawatts demand, there's an actual 100 megawatt demand from Amazon. So I've got a better picture now, I suspect, or we've got a better picture now than what was presented to you by the PR person. Does that mean I trust Dominion? No. Does it mean I am inclined to believe much of what they say? Yes. Am I inclined to believe they're going to live up to their deadlines in providing us with additional information? I'm going to hold their feet to the fire. And there is quite a bit of information that they are due to us in the next 2 weeks. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to who you're dealing with. I mean, if you're dealing with a PR person, they're going to shine you on. That's their job.
But so the answer is yes. It is possible that they could still submit.
They could. Does that have any impact? No, because you're still going to have to go to the SEC. What I would suggest a twofold approach. One, submit your comments or your objections to Dominion first in November, early November, before they've made their decision. Put that on record with Dominion. Save your firepower for the SEC until such time as a route's actually submitted to them. I mean, there's no sense putting together a resolution that says we're opposed to Route A if that's what ultimately is not submitted to the State Corporation Commission. I mean, it looks kind of silly if you submit a resolution, you put a resolution out there, it gets into the SEC's hands, says we don't want it running down the creek, and Dominion runs it. Let's say they run it on the south side of I-66 through somebody's living room. I just think if you want to impact where Dominion puts it, or if you want to try and influence them, I would send the comment to Dominion first, because sending it to the SEC or taking a resolution against a particular plan until it's actually submitted to the SEC is premature. I mean, it's like what we were talking with earlier in the BZA hearing. It's just a matter of process. You have to go through the steps. And you might as well do the steps in order that make the most sense rather than trying to jump ahead one or.
Here's why I'm asking, because in the resolution that is here, this resolution is stating that we do not support the proposed location, which is that first line that they sent to us. But they could very well come back with another line which really makes this null and void.
Correct.
So in your opinion from the Planning Commission, what you're saying is wait until we have gotten the full report from Planning Commission to be able then. You see, I'm trying to wrap my mind around. Okay, so we make this resolution, but that should not be the totality of our position.
No, correct. Right. You're correct.
We should have a resolution that incorporates a couple of the plans that they have right now. Because this is just for one route, the first route that they gave us.
You're absolutely correct, because we don't know what they're going to propose to the SEC, and they may come back. I mean, we've got 4 or 5 alternate routes right now. We don't know if that's all of them.
However, if they should apply to the SEC without a resolution from us, how would that look on us?
It would make no difference.
It would not?
No. Because you can't testify to the SEC until the application is made, and until the application is made to the SEC, which delineates what, and they may have more than one route down there. I mean, it's just premature. That's why I'm saying, take the report, make your feelings known. I mean, Dominion may very well come to us, and probably will come to us between now and the time we do the report or finish the report, with additional alternate routes, some of which may be even worse than the ones that are already here, and some that may be substantially better. We just don't know that at this point in time. So what I would suggest is just holding your fire until such point in time we've got a clearer impression or clearer understanding of just what exactly they're going to do. They may pull this initial proposed route out. My position all along, I think I've made some of you aware of this, my position all along is that the routing engineers probably pulled the map, decided where they needed the substation, and then drew the most absolutely obnoxious route they could find. And they did that intentionally. I would suggest that they chose the most environmentally sensitive, heavily residential routing that they could find, with engineering demands and environmental considerations and health considerations, to generate just the opposition that they're generating here in Somerset and in the residents, because they probably have an ulterior motive. They probably got another plan that they much prefer building, but they want the opposition to that one to buttress or to use as support for the other plan. Again, that's me being cynical, but I've dealt enough with local, state, and federal governments to know that that's what they do. So why chase the stick off the porch when it just isn't time?
Comments on the proposal?
Well, wait a minute. We have questions here, so we're going to go around with the questions for
Yeah.
Mr. Weir.
If there are alternate routes on that's being proposed, those are routes that are documented that have been proposed by Dominion.
Correct. I've got the most recent map right here.
And is
I
the-
only have one copy of it.
Is the first one that they proposed still the primary?
It is identified as,
Preliminary, I think. Alternatives.
they don't say primary. They got preliminary alternatives, public feedback alternatives. And quite frankly, I don't know where some of these came from,
Yeah,
but
there is no one proposed route. There are multiple, existing right now, there are multiple proposed routes. So if you take a stand against the proposed route, there's no idea what you're really taking a stand against, because there are now multiple.
But
I could give you a copy of this.
But the-
I've got another one in my office.
But when they came to us first and foremost, they had one proposed route.
Yeah. Let me show you.
No, they had more than one.
I think this will clear it up for you.
No, when they came to us, they had one.
They only presented one with us.
No, there's the original slide, showed it running through Conway State Park and through a couple of other routes. There was more than one.
No,
We got bent by one.
No.
This was the first one they submitted. Everybody remember this one? You got it in the work session?
Yes.
With the single red line?
Yes.
10 days later, why don't you pass this around?
With you all,
10 days later,
right, but not
they
with
gave us
us.
this one, which now has,
Right.
you know, 1, 2, 3. During the course of the meeting,
Right,
they added another one,
yes, they did.
which they hadn't had in their handout, so they're now up to 4. Now they're up to 1, 2, 3, 4,
I said
5, 6, 7,
Wow,
8, 9, 10 different routes.
wow.
So
So what you're basically saying, Mr. Weir, is that this resolution is for the first one that we
So
got.
the first one, which may never come to fruition.
All right. Any other questions, Mr. Morse?
Mr. Weir, you want to see this? Mr. Weir, is there any way Haymarket could benefit from Dominion running underground through the town?
Certainly. Underground through town? There is going to be a greater power demand in the western part of the county. It is going to be eventually needed when the area builds out, if it builds out, and they don't convert, and the county doesn't convert it to residential. But is that in their 2017 window? If they don't build an Amazon there, probably not. Long term, is it going to be needed? Yeah. What is that window? 2020, 2030, 2040. I mean, it all depends on the pace of development. Quite frankly, from 29 west. But if you look at what's going on, the Lerner property has sat vacant for. I think it's been on the books for 25 years with that.
I'm sorry, as it relates mostly to our plans, our streetscape, is there any way we could benefit as a town, for lack of a better word, milking them? You know, using, is that not a good term? Oh.
Using the opportunity
Yeah.
provided.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No, because they're not going to sink the distribution lines.
Okay.
They're going to do the transmission lines underground, but they're not going to go back and redo the transmission lines like some of us thought they were going to do several years ago as part of the streetscape. So from an aesthetic standpoint, does putting it underground help the town? Yes, because you don't have the transmission poles. Does it provide any additional benefit beyond the aesthetic? I can't really think of one. Yeah, we're just in the way.
Mr. Mayor?
Correct. Ms. Swin?
He was covering some of it. I guess my concern is not having a statement out there at all from the council. I understand what you're saying about it not being, if we're too specific, then that could lead us down a slippery slope later on. But I'm concerned about not having some kind of statement out there. And I don't even know that it's that you're against having power out here. I don't think any of us want a route that's going to push it into somebody else's neighborhood and have the same issues. but it is our job to protect this town. And so I guess we feel strong about having some kind of statement out there.
All right.
Is that a
Is that a
I don't know
question?
if that's so much as a question as a comment on top of what.
I see where you're coming from, and I see where from a PR standpoint, from a yes, we're out there.
Yes.
Yes, it's a good idea. From a practical standpoint, I think it's premature. If you want to do a resolution, great. That says you're opposed to that specific route.
Yeah.
I would clean this up a little bit, though. I would take out things like the loss of the potential future benefits of the Norfolk Southern Railroad expansion, because that's not technically correct.
Bullets 2, 4, and 6.
Yeah, bullets. I haven't even looked at it that carefully. I would clean this up a little
Well,
bit
I
and
do
make
have
it a
concerns
little
about
more
double
make it a
stack.
little more bland, so that you don't box yourself into a corner with a statement. But quite frankly,
So,
you're having this meeting here tonight accomplishes the same thing.
and then another question I guess I have then is, just because this resolution comes out about this proposed plan, that doesn't mean then that when another proposed plan comes out, we're not going to make a resolution about that one
And
as well.
therein lies the danger. You don't want. I mean,
You don't want to
You-
start
you-
chasing resolutions?
you don't want to start chasing every route.
Every route.
And you can't say no, we don't want this one. They come up
You-
with another one. No, we don't want that one. No, we don't want that one. And if you want to be effective, and this is my take, is if you want to be effective, you look at all that. You look at it all. You wait till till Dominion's ready to hop on a particular route, and then you make your recommendation. But you engage Dominion ahead of time and try and influence them, and then when it comes time to go to the FCC, you do that, and hopefully move the needle that way. Perhaps going to Dominion first and trying to work with them to
Yes.
get your preferred one.
Your political
Okay.
game may be short-lived. To your point, option number 2, if we ever intend to get Dominion Power in here, we've already voted no before they submitted their proposal. I would advise against that. I don't think we'll ever get them in here, but if the town wants to, we've already said no, and we cannot give them
I hadn't even thought about that.
Mrs. Swinford, any other questions?
No.
Mr. Passanel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Bob, thank you very much. That was a really good brief. I appreciate it. I was at the
I was
meeting.
disjointed.
Okay, I was at the meeting. That was a very, albeit very long meeting. I thought it was very productive. I have a lot of questions, so just hopefully we can be patient and run through them. I mean, relative to the double stack through town, what do you think your position is going to be from the planning commission? And if,
My
if
guess
it's
is the planning
premature, we can wait, but I can tell you what
my position is, and I suspect what the planning commission's position is going to be is, yes, they're going to be opposed to it from an aesthetic standpoint. No, we don't want to see it. But as a practical matter, I don't think it matters what we say on that particular aspect of this.
I asked your question, Dominion Power, on that, and what they said is a state regulation. It's a state license, and they have to apply to the state, but they don't have to apply to anybody else. So from that standpoint, we kind of like our 1 mile radius that we can comment on. We can comment on it, but I don't know that we can do a whole lot about it. We'd have to look into the state regulation of it and see if there's comment that we can make to that.
And that doesn't, I've looked briefly into that aspect of it, it doesn't seem to favor us very well. To be honest with you, yeah, I hate it from an aesthetic standpoint, and if Amazon chooses a different location, it becomes a moot point, because they won't do it. Maybe. I say maybe because there is the potential for them doing it anyway, as part of a backup. If you want, I'll look more heavily into what alternatives the town might have. Perhaps Mr. Vanderpool knows. I think we're judging on what I've read and what Dominion has said. I think we're kind of stuck with it. If they want to do it, they've got the right to do it.
I think they
Whether
said
we
that
like it
too,
or not,
if I
yeah.
remember.
Anything that they already have up there.
Yeah.
They can
Right.
add to with very
Yeah.
little.
Very little comment from us, correct.
Okay, well, thanks on that. Just a clarification on the property line, because I remember you were talking about the, perhaps that Somerset Crossing has some property in the town of Haymarket on the south side of the railroad track. I just want to be,
I meant to look at that, never actually did. If you give me just a second, I can tell you. I have a lot of questions.
That's okay.
okay, okay.
Their HOA property is, at least.
Their HOA property. Well, that's good to
Judging
know.
from the map.
Okay. As far as the VRE second track for commuter rail in the future, I heard you say, and I haven't seen the study, but do you know what level that study was? Has that been engineered to definitively say that the track would be on the other side towards Green Hill and not go to the outside of the existing track?
That's the way it was supposed to be engineered, and the reason that it had to be engineered that way is that's where the existing right-of-way for their expansion to double track is. That's where Norfolk Southern has
Okay.
it. They do not have a right-of-way on the other side.
Okay.
This was discussed ad nauseum roughly 10 years ago when the first expansion talk
That's
came out.
always been our understanding is that they.
It will
take
cut through
some of
the backyards in Green Hill Crossing.
Okay.
My suspicion, for what it's worth is, my suspicion is you will not see an extension to Haymarket. You will see an extension to Gainesville, and then
A dead end, yeah. No?
down the bypass probably, depending on where the commercial development goes.
Oh, okay.
My understanding, and this is strictly secondhand, is that unlike Dominion, which hasn't done its environmental engineering yet, Norfolk Southern did their engineering and environmental studies on that proposed route, and let's just say they found more problems and costs than they had counted on.
Okay, all right. But it's not technically infeasible if they went in the opposite direction?
No.
Okay, thank you. Do we know if the Army Corps of Engineers, you mentioned them relative to the wetlands and the conservation, I guess, district or easement, however we name that over by Carolina Road. Do we know if that is their area of jurisdiction? Do we know that definitively?
Mr. Vanderpool could probably answer that definitively, but I do believe the Corps of Engineers has to approve anything that's built in a floodplain. The floodplain has to be remapped, and you have to get environmental credits to replace the wetlands, correct?
Yes.
There are several different federal agencies that get involved. With regard to the floodplain, you're basically dealing with FEMA on floodplain issues. With regard to wetlands, you're dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers. So any disturbance in the wetlands over a certain size requires a permit from the Army Corps. If it's a small amount, they can go under what's called a national permit, but I suspect, well, I don't know, because I don't know what all they're planning to do in the wetlands. But if it's above a certain level, then they have to submit for a permit, and they do have the ability to mitigate on a 2-for-1 basis, where they can buy a wetlands bank somewhere else to mitigate that.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Okay, the property that is under discussion at Amazon, do we know the proximity to the railroad right-of-way? And the reason why I ask this question, maybe this is something that we can investigate, I don't know, from a technical perspective, what type of technical instrumentation they may have a need for, and any impacts from the railroad to their operation from vibration from the trains operating by. I know that might sound a little outlandish, but I've been involved in studies where we had to do that, and we had to put down rubber pads on the track to attenuate that vibration. So I'm curious about the proximity of that building, or where that building may go.
And there's two buildings, correct?
There's an existing building, the Hopman Building, and there is a 500,000 square foot planned, or roughly 500,000 square foot planned data center. Ken's not here. I have asked the town clerk to contact the planning office. The planning office was supposed to send us a copy of the plan for that particular site. It's actually in final site plan right now. But I don't know where on the parcel, because I haven't seen a site plan. I don't know where they're going to locate the building, whether they're going to push it forward up to 55, whether they're going to nestle it back against the back of the property, which would be near the railroad tracks. I don't know. I'm hoping to have a better sense of that once we get the stuff from the county, but they have not delivered it to my knowledge. My guess is that they're going to build it to the rear of the property because they've got a real security concern, which sort of seems sort of by the boards now that the cat's out of the bag. But that's a question you would probably have to ask Amazon. It's probably a question they wouldn't answer.
Right, okay. All right, well, thanks, Bob. So from the perspective, and I agree with what you said, I think we talked about it at our work session, perhaps, of having a strategy of responding to Dominion and then having a more technical response to the SCC. So from that perspective, do you think it would make sense for the town to perhaps seek the help from somebody with a real technical expertise, perhaps a consultant, independent contractor type, to help us fashion something that would be, in your opinion, bulletproof?
I'd love it, but you're not going to like the expense.
Yeah.
If you want to pursue that route from a cost efficiency basis, I can't believe I'm saying this, you might want to try reaching out to somebody like the PEC and tapping into their resources. Just a suggestion.
You know, it was interesting. When I went up to the Battlefield High School and read some of the boards, and you were there, and a whole host of other chanting people, they had said that the cost to go underground was anywhere from 8.5 to 9 times the cost of, let me finish, going overground, right, overhead, and then the life cycle cost underground versus the overhead was half. I think it was 35 years to 70. I mean, so from a technical perspective, how can we rebut that? Any ideas about that without having somebody with the technical expertise to help us?
Using their own testimony before JLARC,
Okay.
which says exactly the opposite. In many cases, it can actually be cheaper in some circumstances. And ultimately, cost, in a lot of circumstances, really doesn't enter into it with the SEC. It's essentially, since those costs are essentially borne by the ratepayers at the end of the day, if the SEC determines that it's in the best interest of everybody involved and on a grander scheme to put it underground, well, then Dominion's got to put it underground.
Okay. Well, that information would be helpful.
I can give you the JLARC report, but it's pretty big.
Okay. Well, I think maybe we can find some people who can read that and better understand it. So that's great, Bob. I appreciate that. I have to tell you, I think I like the idea of a resolution now as sending a signal, and I think because it's limited to the proposed alignment, I don't think that does us a lot of harm. I don't think they've been forthright in many respects, and I think we need to put them on notice. And I think that helps us put them on notice as well as let the town know what's going on and where we stand as far. And I don't think that resolution says anything about not working with Dominion or being against any development. So I have a prepared statement I can make later. But from my perspective, I'm sorry, go ahead. Right. So I don't think we're using a cudgel here, but I think we're letting them know that this particular alignment is so problematic and, in your own words, obnoxious. And I think I agree with that. That I think we need to go out there to the public and say that and put them on notice.
If that's the case, then I would just suggest striking a couple of lines just so it's technically accurate. If you look at the fifth whereas, where the council values from our property values on line 2, comma, I would strike the loss of the potential future benefits of Norfolk Southern Railroad expansion of the commuter rail service. Just strike that. It's not technically correct.
But it is potential, right?
No, I don't think so. Not judging by the engineering drawings I've seen of Norfolk Southern, the location of the right-of-way. It's not going to impact if they put a... It doesn't impact their right-of-way and their ability to construct the track. I just don't think it... Which one's bullet 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, and then that bullet says proposed alignment will inhibit. I don't believe that will. I don't think that's technically correct. Those are the only two. That would be my suggestion if you want to pass the resolution tonight. Four?
Unless the town's done an
Sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on, so I can't see.
proposed alignment creates a negative environmental impact on the North Fork Creek. We don't know that. There's no
I think we live with that one. I think that one's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's by definition because of its location. Actually, there is a study that's just that it's in VRE's hands, and they don't want to let us. They don't want anybody to see it.
All right. So I do have one more question, or I guess a slight comment when you're finished.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I have been in contact with Mr. Canlon and Mr. Stewart and others, and we have gotten a commitment from them against the proposed alignment. Of course, Mr. Canlon has said that he's against also the Piedmont alignment, and it looks
Really?
like we're looking to go towards the I-66 alignment. So I think...
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. By Piedmont alignment, you mean the one that goes to the golf course?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the one that they showed us the other night. I mean, all that is to try to split communities
Exactly.
and drive a wedge. I've even talked to Sean Landry at QBE and told him that Mr. Stewart has said that he will try to get a hearing here in Prince William County. I asked him how many seats, how many people we can fit at QBE, and I think he said by code close to 400. So I would recommend that we try to push to have that in the town of Haymarket so that we can get a lot of people from our community to that hearing, as well as from the surrounding communities.
And also, during our meeting there, I think they mentioned a resolution that both of them were going to put
Yeah.
forth to the county.
Yeah.
So,
So they are,
very receptive.
yes, I would say that they are very receptive. I think they're willing to work with us and to support us as much as possible. And I'll leave it at that for now. I'm done with my questions.
Mr. Aiken, any questions?
Most everything's been covered, but I have to go on record to say that I agree with Bob that it might be premature for this resolution. Number one is that if Dominion all of a sudden came up and did an early submittal to the SEC, it would not prevent us from calling a emergency meeting and passing this that same night, if necessary. So, I mean, it's not that if we don't do it tonight, it'll never get done. We always have it in our back pocket that we can do it. We can have a potential more comprehensive one in November if time permits to wait that long. And Dominion already knows that we're against this. I mean, doing a resolution is more of a PR stunt here rather than a productive action. So I would think that taking a step back, even rewriting this one, keeping in our back pocket that can be exercised in a moment's notice is advantageous to us. Talking to Dominion, even though they know that we're against it, but talking to them further and trying to work with them on alternate routes and being involved in all that prior to this coming out, I think leads to a better working relationship with them. Everyone I've talked to in town and the surrounding jurisdictions in that, Haymarket Day and other events in that, I've made it clear that the town is definitely against this. I don't think anybody thinks we're for it. So, again, I'm not sure that the resolution is the right time right now.
I think the intent was is to hear from the Planning Commission. As you remember, we first sat that based on the preliminary information that we got back, that we wanted to get a statement out, but we wanted to wait until hearing from the Planning Commission. I think the intent as well was to let the citizens and the residents know that we were not in support of this. So it was a statement similar to what the County Board of Supervisors did in '07 when they made a statement. Does a resolution really mean anything at that point? I think, debatable, I guess, but it's just going on record there again in case it does go through and they slip it in on their October original agenda.
I do have a point that I need to make mention. When we look at all the other proposed routes, almost all of them except for this one doesn't affect us. So I believe we need to make a statement about the one that concerns us. Even the other proposed route further towards Somerset, that's outside of our jurisdiction. We cannot stand up to make a claim as to say we oppose it because it's not in our town limits. But this one is. So in reviewing the position that we need to take, it is concerning the route that they have proposed to us
At the meeting. Excuse me, Mr. Weir. Go ahead, Councilman.
This resolution has to do with the route through our town that concerns us. So I understand and I've taken into consideration everything. I mean, Mr. Weir, he has some great points, and I can't wait to see that report. I mean, I think from that report we're going to garnish more information and more ammunition that we're going to need. However, the resolution with the two corrections that's here, this resolution is in reference to the one route that affects the town of Haymarket. Every other route does not affect the town of Haymarket. So here's the deal. If they decide to run the route going to Wheeler, it doesn't affect us. Maybe a small portion would come into the town. So I think we do need to go on record to have a position concerning what they propose to us, because they have not yet proposed to us the 7 other alternatives.
Right.
They proposed to us one, and I think we need to respond to that one. So our citizens, I don't think there's any doubt in their minds that we're against it, but I think we do need to go on record to say we are against it.
One point of clarification, of the routes that I've seen on the maps, 4 of them go through the town of Haymarket. 2 of them go through the railroad tracks. There's 2 separate routes that actually cover that same path through the wetlands. And then one goes on the south side of 66, one goes on the north side of 66. So there are actually 4 routes under current consideration that actually go through the town of Haymarket.
But how many has been proposed to the town council?
Just the one that was presented to us.
Correct, but the maps that they came in, the maps they came in and showed, none were on 66, but 2 of them went through the wetlands. So there are 2 different routes that that come in different directions outside, but then they both use that path.
We are dealing with a very deceptive presentation. We have to deal with the facts, and the facts remains that they provided us with one route.
They provided us one route, but they provided maps showing other routes.
But those maps, how much authority does those maps hold? I mean, they come back to Mr. Weir almost every meeting. There's a new drawing.
Correct, but they haven't presented anything to the SEC yet, so none of it makes any difference yet.
May I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Councilman Swinford.
They did say that they had, those other routes were in mind, but they had already dismissed them. But now, so even more important that we need to make some kind of statement. I don't think it's a PR stunt. I think it's more as it's a public statement that we're trying to say as a council that, you know, we're opposed to the proposed route is what they provided to us was the proposed preferred route. It was preferred.
Okay.
The other ones, they said they'd already dismissed. And I think that we need to come forward with a statement on that preferred route. And I don't consider that a publicity stunt as much as it is a unified statement. And in it, we're not saying we don't want anything to do with Dominion. We're saying that we're willing to work with Dominion. We're not like, by making a resolution, we're not closing off further communication
Correct.
with them. So this is one resolution, but it's a statement that we're trying to make that we're serious about this position, and we're serious about the situation, and that we'd like to continue.
Then I would suggest changing it slightly to say the proposed route or any route that goes through the wetlands. Because the proposed route that we come out against, if they go back to option C, that still goes to the wetlands, it's a totally different route now. But it still covers the same path throughout Haymarket.
But they had told us they had dismissed those routes.
They haven't provided anything to SCC yet, so
Right,
nothing is
exactly, right.
off
Which
the table.
we can come up with another resolution, though, at that time, can we not?
Sure.
But again, we have the issue of
What
every
harm-
time they come up with something, we say no.
Oh,
It starts looking like that all we're doing is saying no instead of trying to work with them. That's my concern.
And I agree, and I don't know that we're totally trying to make a resolution over every proposal they
No,
come up with.
no.
I think we're trying to make an initial statement, and then working from there.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my
because,
understanding.
Because when they do come with the 6
Or
to
my
6,
feeling.
that part comes through town, through the
Yeah.
town.
Right,
Yes.
yes.
It does.
I think we're trying to get them to the table. I'm not sure they're going to come to the table honestly. And I think sending this signal out, and I don't think we're hammering them over the head here. I think we're letting them know we don't like what they did, coming in with one proposal, not talking to us, and showing us the data for how they eliminated the other proposals. And we want to sit down with them. So we will sit down with them and go through tabletops, whatever it takes, roll up your sleeves, whatever we have to do. But we would like to be part of the process. And I think that's what this says.
If you were did you go to the Planning Commission meeting when they presented to them? The term that concerned me the most was when Mr. Weir asked, is our understanding that you have a client? And they called them a client. They said they could not confirm nor deny that they were under confidentiality, but that they had a client. So that's their viewpoint of their client. So I feel very strongly that we need to come out and at least make a strong statement and absolutely willing to work with them on other routes. We're not debating that. I don't think that's in question. I think we're all more than happy.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even want to meet and sit with them until I get Mr. Weir and the Planning Commission's report. No, honestly. Because we're feeding off you guys. You guys have done your research. You guys have gone out and you're promising us something that's going to floor us, in color. I did hear something in color.
I see a lot of work in my future.
So, I would not entertain talking to them until I've read that report. But I think we do need to let them know that what they came to us with, not what they came a few days later to the Planning Commission with, drawing lines and adding 3 additional routes. I think we just need to send that message to them that what they propose to us. And I'm thinking about the residents. Mm-hmm. The residents, as of now, apart from that work session, they have not heard from us.
Nope.
They know that some of us have been in contact. We've been with meeting with supervisors. We've been trying to meet with as HOAs. We've been putting together different HOAs. But the residents of our town, they have not heard from us. And we need to let them know that, hey, this is still a fight. we're still back in. There's no money being paid under the table. And if so, I didn't get any. But but I think we do need to let the residents know that, we're still in the fight and we're supporting them.
Would you like to make that in part of a motion to accept this resolution?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about the brag. No, yeah, I'll read it. Can I go ahead?
Sure.
Resolution number 2014-0923-1. Non-support for proposed Dominion power transmission and distribution lines. Whereas the town of Haymarket Town Council was presented with a proposed installation of Dominion power transmission and distribution lines through the town and surrounding areas at our Monday, August 25th, 2014 work session. And whereas the council has sought citizen input, established working relationships with elected officials throughout the council and the state to ascertain their stance on the proposal, and supported our planning commission in their efforts to conduct a public input session at their meeting on September 8th, 2014. And whereas the council believes that it is of the utmost importance to inform residents of what this body deems to be the best response at this point in the process in deliberating over the proposed project. And whereas the council recognizes the importance of economic development opportunities for the county and the town, and whereas the council values our citizens' concerns with regard to our town's view shed, the effect on our property values, and most importantly, the effects on the health, safety, and welfare of our residents and surrounding neighbors from the proposed transmission and distribution lines. Now, therefore, be it be resolved that the town of Haymarket does not support the proposed location of the Dominion power transmission and distribution lines along the railroad tracks for the following reasons. The proposed alignment degrades our historic town and is inconsistent with the town's plans and investments. The double-stack distribution line along Washington Street would detract from the historic nature of the town and is not acceptable. The proposed alignment has a direct effect on the environment by running through the town's conservation district, the state-designated resource protection area, and the 100-year flood plain. The proposed alignment creates a negative environmental impact on North Fork Creek and the already distressed Chesapeake Bay watershed. The proposed alignment will have a negative impact on the property values of our residents and will create an unfavorable view shed throughout the town. The proposed project creates a potential unhealthy environment and threatens the health, safety, and welfare of our residents and surrounding neighbors. Be it therefore resolved that the town of Haymarket will continue to work with Dominion Power, provided the corporation continues to show a good faith effort in acknowledging and addressing citizens' concerns and change the proposed alignment of the transmission line, while at the same time making an effort to avoid creating adverse impacts to other surrounding communities as the current proposed projects egregiously affects the town's residents and surrounding neighbors.
Anita, so moved.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
Nope.
Further roll call vote, please. Mr. Henshaw?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you all.
Hey, who put this big word inside there, man? I'm Jamaican.
I don't think we have any other scheduled business.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
There you go.
Okay.
All right. Great. Also,
Let me just, before we leave, I just wanted to introduce to the council one of our associates, Karen Cohn, who's here tonight, who's working with me on prior projects. Karen is in our municipal law and real estate group. She has an undergraduate degree in architecture. She then earned her law degree and clerk for a federal judge. Practiced law for a number of years, and then also earned most recently a master's degree in real estate development. And I'm proud to say I was one of her professors for that.
wow. That's great.
Welcome.
Well, welcome.